Hey, welcome. If you hate rust as much as I do, you're in the right place. Hey, before I get into this video, I just want to give you a little bit of background on myself. My name's Chad. I've got over 37 years of auto body, auto mechanic, and car building experience. For everything from high-end show cars to daily drivers to as a certified mechanic. So I've got a lot of experience and background in automotive, and I'm sharing some of this information with you guys to be able to better educate yourself and know what to look for and know what questions asked in some cases. So stay tuned and I'll get you information you want. I've been asked to do some different videos on Jeep builds, configurations, and what to look for, do's and don'ts, just brief overview short videos. This here is a prime example. Guy I know just bought this for his son. It's 2003 TJ. So what I'm going to show you is what to look for when you're looking at these TJs, especially ones that have been modified. That's going to be kind of the key point on this particular video. 2003 Jeep Sport, Wrangler Sport. Okay, first of all, come around here. Okay, first, red flags are going to be this right here. This angle right here. These should be more straight up and down. Okay, that should be your first red flag. Second red flag is the springs. You see how far off angle these springs are. This spring is pretty much rubbing the inside of the bump stop and the spring perch. That tells me that the control arms are not correct for this Jeep. This particular Jeep has about a 3.5-inch lift under it. They've got Ranchero RS 9000 shocks, which the travel on is a lot further than the actual spring and suspension itself. That being said, be careful with getting too tall of a shock, because if they're too long and this bottoms out without the proper bump stops, which this one does not have, it's got the factory short bump stops here, and it does not have any pucks in here at the bottom. Bump stops on a build like this is very important, because that's going to protect your shocks, it's going to protect your tires, your fenders, and your fender flares. Okay, that being said, moving back. Okay, for most of us that are experienced, we can look at these control arms right here and know that this was a budget build. That being said, with this suspension relaxed like it is with this up on the lift, I want you to look right here. Okay, this lower control arm mount for the lower control arm, you can see how this is actually bent up, where this has been hitting several times from the suspension flexing out, which with the aftermarket control arms, they're a lot better. They're adjustable. You're also able to adjust your caster angle. This caster angle on this particular Jeep here is almost straight up and down, which means it's going to wander, it's going to dart, and there's going to be severe drivability issues with it. That's a big cause of death wobble, and it ain't just what tires you're running or how many stabilizers you got. Caster angle is probably one of the biggest culprits, especially on a budget build Jeep like this. Okay, moving on to other stuff that you want to look at on a TJ and even other builds and other rigs. Okay, we're going to be looking for rust. I mean, these Jeeps are getting to be 20 years old, and the salt and different chemicals they use on the road is not easy on this old carbon steel. You can see the scaling on this. You can see the scaling up here on the spring perch and up here around the shock mount. This one isn't too bad yet. This one's actually in fairly good shape for the years and the mileage. This is a 2003. I think it's got around 115,000 miles on it. So this thing's been drove quite a bit. So that being said, moving on to the frames. Okay, the frames on these, the way Jeep designed them, were piss poor at best. I don't know how else to describe it. There's almost no drainage out of these frames. It doesn't matter if you're going back to the YJs up till even some of the current ones. There's really nowhere for the water. There's plenty of areas, plenty of places for the water and the grit and grime to get in, but there's really nowhere for this to drain out unless you add holes to them. If you look up under here, the only real drain hole that Jeep put in these Jeeps, for these frames, is one little bitty weep hole right here in the front. And as soon as you start getting grit and grime and dirt, those end up plugging up. The frames cannot drain properly, and most all of these will rust from the inside out. The only way to protect yourself, if you're looking at one of these to purchase, is to get your fingers down inside this frame through some of these inspection holes. These are actually tie-down holes for for towing it on rollbacks and stuff. But you can feel down in there, and this section from your lower control arm mount from your front to the lower control arm mount to the rear, this is a section that almost all of these rust out at. This one here has got some surface rust around on it, but it's in relatively good shape. Again, you can put your fingers down in here and feel the bottom of them. And if it feels like this looks, then that tells you there's quite a bit of rust there. This one here on the inside is actually surprisingly good. I really only found one spot on this entire frame. But while we're here, also something else you want to look at. If you start seeing deck plating on the rockers, deck plating on the quarter, the rear corners, that's normally a sign that someone's trying to hide something. They were popular several years ago as a decorative piece or a protective piece, kind of like what we use for body armor now. But nowadays, for these older Jeeps, a lot of times it's hiding something. So definitely get up in here and look on the inside to make sure that the sheet metal is good. This one here, it looks to be pretty good, other than just some basic surface rust. This is what's called the torque boxes on the Jeep tubs. This is a common rust area for the Jeeps. I'm pointing this out because I'm going to show you on the other side of the vehicle. This side here is starting to get a little bit of rust around here. It's starting to get a little rust around here, but all in all, this torque box is in fairly good shape. The owner probably needs to address some of the rust issues before they get out of hand. Okay, we're going to move on here to the back. Okay, this area gathers more dust, salt, crud, and gunk than anywhere else in a vehicle. You're driving down trails, you're driving down the road, there's construction, dust starts kicking up, you're driving in the winter, there's salt, there's beet juice, there's all the other calcium chloride, all the different agents that they use to remove salt and snow during the winter. After all, we do live in the Rust Belt here in Ohio and further north. But this is an area that you definitely want to pay close attention to, because this is an area that most people does not wash. They don't really spray it out with a pressure washer or anything else. Okay, you can see some scaling here. This is still good on the outside. Now come around the inside of the frame here. Okay, if you can see right here, up in here, this hole right here, where my finger's at, that's a hole in the frame to where this never really got washed out, and it's just sit there and corroded and rusted and corroded and rusted, and so now there's a hole. That's something that'll have to be addressed sooner or later. But all in all, that's the worst spot I found in this entire frame. Now for the tubs, since we're in the back here, standard, this is kind of typical for the tailgates to rust out like this. The thing that is hard to see, and you definitely want to check, is this rear mount on these tubs. It's hard to see up in here, but you can get your hand in between the frame and the bottom of the tub, and you can feel across through here, and you're feeling for blisters. On the metal for these here, if you start feeling blisters, there's heavy rust, and like the frame, they rust from the inside out. So it is very common on these TJ tubs that this rear mount will be completely gone. The only thing holding up the back of the Jeeps are your mounts for your cross member here in front of the gas tank. This Jeep here is actually a rare duck because it came factory with a Dana 44. This is actually, I just learned something by working on this Jeep, because I didn't realize that the 44 upgrade was even an option for the TJs with the outside of the Rubicon realm. But this was an OEM spec Dana 44 from this. Okay, we know there's a 3.5 inch lift. You want to look at how they lifted these Jeeps. This is relocation brackets. We're going to get into some of this on the front of the Jeep as well here in a minute. This is a cantilever, basically extension that bolts on. I think this was a Rubicon Express, or I'm not sure who the manufacturer is on this one here. I'm not bashing anybody, but anytime you add a device like this, okay, imagine you holding a broomstick down, a foot down, and start pushing over at it. It doesn't take a lot of force. It's a fulcrum point. It doesn't take a lot of force to bend and break the original mounts off the Jeep, off the differentials. This is something that you want to try to stay away from. A budget build, something you just drive as a daily driver. You put a lift kit on your Jeeps or off-road or off the truck to put bigger tires, make it look better. You can get by with this kind of a lift and this kind of configuration. For someone like us and the guys we wheel with, we wheel some heavy stuff, and this will eventually fail. It's not recommended for this type of a build, except for if you're just looking to make your vehicle look better, put the lift kit and bigger tires. Okay, we've got lift kit, we've got 33-inch tires, factory skid plate on the gas tank. This is one of the first upgrades you want to do in the back of the vehicle. Before bumpers, before lights and everything else, you need a good skid plate here, because it don't take much to crush this up and your fuel pump quit working. Okay, we're moving on around the side here. I mean, all this is just typical rust on your differentials, springs, upper control arms. Now, if you look in here, up here by where the shock mounts are, this is your forward cross member, just talking about just a second ago. You can see the scale and the rust on this. If this is not addressed here soon, this will eventually fail. And sadly, you probably won't know it until it's way, way bad, because your tub is bolted to this, the front of your gas tank is bolted to that. There's a lot of things holding it in place. But when it rusts and breaks away from the frame, you're not going to know it really until you start looking and find it. And eventually, other parts it'll cause other parts to fail. Okay. Moving to this side. Okay, we was talking about torque boxes a little bit ago. As you can see, this side here is just a little worse off than on the driver's side. This is why it's important to inspect all areas of these things. Again, check the inside of the frame. But as you can see here, we got a lot of heavy rust on this side of the torque box. This here is actually through. This is a hole. So this torque box is going to have to be repaired or replaced to fix this correctly. Also, check your body mounts. Make sure someone hasn't monkeyed around with these. If you're building OEM, some of us build custom stuff, but that's a video for another day. But just to check all your body mounts, check all your control arm bushings. Here, come in here. Okay, looking at the control arm bushings. Okay, you can see how these bushings are really starting to crack and deteriorate. This is a classic sign of them starting to fail. I mean, obviously they're the OEM stamped control boxes. I'm not sure what they've got all over it, but but look at your bushings. This side here is starting to blow out and it's starting to crack and deteriorate. Obviously, you want to look at all your drivetrain, check for leaks and so on, transmission transfer case, all that. That's pretty self-explanatory. We'll go up front here. Sorry, I'm too daggone tall for this stuff. Okay, when you're looking at these, I mean, it's normal to have a little bit of surface rust around this stuff. What area that you really want to look at when you're looking at any of these old TJs is back up behind the center fender. This back in here, that's another area that hardly ever gets washed off, it hardly ever gets sprayed off, and it rusts out quick. I mean, most of the sheet metal on these are made out of 18 gauge, it's really thin. When you start seeing rust and it starts blistering up, chances are you've already got a pinhole there. So rust maintenance on these are critical for longevity. Okay, again, we're here. Check the inside of the frame. Now, this side of the frame here, I don't know if you can hear that, but I've got a lot of crud down in the inside of this frame. I'm trying to pull some out here for you so you can see. It's not going to slide up. Okay, I was talking about earlier, feel around. Okay, this right here is a scale that I was just talking about. This is on the inside of the frame. This is deterioration and rust on the inside of the frame. That's why a lot of people, when they look at these Jeeps, they look at the outside of the frame. Oh, the frame looks good, it's in good shape. Try to inspect the inside of the frame as best you can. This frame here, other than a little bit of surface rust, looks really, really well. This section right here, for some reason, this side of the vehicle is rusted worse than the other one. But this is why I just pulled out of the inside of that frame rail. So do your inspection, do your due diligence. Again, spring angle. This axle really needs to come forward about an inch. As these travel on a radius, look to see where your spring is setting. I mean, obviously this isn't at ride height. As this comes up, the bottom of the spring will come forward a little bit. It's not going to come forward that much. That's a pretty steep angle on these drop links. Okay, back to configuration. It's been modified. The reason why I could tell this was a budget build was because the relocation brackets that I was talking about in the rear. The upper panhard, the panhard bar, or the centering link as some people call it, this is a cheaper way of doing it. This right here is, you know, it works fine for a daily driver or something. You're just, like I said, just put a lift kit on, bigger tires, make it look better. For those of us that want to wheel and use these off-road, if all the other suspension issues were corrected and dealt with to get this to where it'll work, this bushing for this drop link, you need to be able to take this on and off when you're wheeling. With this configuration here with the relocation brackets, this right here is a major deal to get this off at this point. Because to disconnect this at the bottom, you got to pull the steering stabilizer shock, you got to drop the tie rod in, drop all of this down so that you can get this off the bushing or off the mount. And if you want to do quick disconnects, forget about it. There's no way that you can use it for this application. But this is a good point and something for you guys to look at when you're looking these vehicles over, you know, when you're thinking about purchasing them, or you're looking at, you know, building one, and it's already had some modifications done. Something else, this has got a really weird configuration on it because we're running the steering stabilizer here, which is kind of tied into similar to what the OEM did for them, but then we got this here as well. This one is tied into a bracket off the panhard bar. Simple U-bolts, plate, but look what it's doing to the front differential cover. I mean, these differential covers on these Dana 30s, you know, they're pretty thick, they're pretty resilient. But over time, on this wearing, at some point, that's going to hit and wear enough that you're going to have a hole there. Whether you're driving on the street or whether you're driving it off-road or taking it to Moab, you know, this is all the stuff that you need to look at. And this is simple stuff that you can look at without having it up on the lift. I mean, I've got that convenience here, but this is all the stuff that you can look at while you're in the guy's driveway or in the parking lot at the dealership to look at these things. The rust is the death of these things. Be prepared, do everything you can, inspect everything you can before you purchase one. All in all, the gentleman that bought this Jeep here, he got us a pretty solid Jeep overall. I'm actually impressed on how well a condition this Jeep is in. It has a few issues, but overall, it's a solid build, especially for someone just starting out. So this is just a quick video of stuff to look for on the TJs, specifically on if you're looking at buying them, and what to look for if you're thinking about buying one. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks.